Captain Alex Monroe stood on the bridge of the UNS Defiant, watching the stars streak past on the main display. She was 41 years old, with gray hair starting to show in her short black cut. Her crew knew her as someone who never gave up, even when things looked impossible. Today would test that reputation more than she could imagine. The year was 2487. Humans had been part of the Galactic Coalition for 42 years now. The Coalition was a group of 17 alien species that worked together to keep peace in their part of space. But humans were the newest members, and most aliens still thought of them as primitive and weak. Humans got the worst trade deals, couldn't buy advanced weapons, and nobody really listened to them in the big meetings. Alex didn't care much about politics. She cared about doing her job right. Right now her job was a simple patrol mission near the Keltar system. Nothing exciting, just watching for trouble that probably wouldn't come. Commander Jamie Torres sat at the tactical station, running system checks like he did every day. He was 36, quiet and thoughtful, always thinking 3 steps ahead. Where Alex trusted her gut, Jamie trusted numbers and plans. Together, they made a good team. Lieutenant Karen Boyd was at the weapons station, probably tinkering with something she thought could work better. At 29, she was the youngest officer on the bridge, but she knew more about the ship's weapons than anyone else alive. She had helped design them, after all. Down in the medical bay, Dr. Nathan Kim was probably reading some alien biology text. He was 53 and had spent most of his life studying alien life forms. He joined the military to see the galaxy, not to fight wars. He always asked if violence was really necessary. Chief Engineer Linda Hayes was in the engine room, doing what she always did, making sure everything ran perfectly. At 44, she had seen more broken ships than most people had seen working ones. Her crew would walk through fire for her because she would do the same for them. The peaceful morning ended when the emergency broadcast came through. Alex straightened in her chair as the Coalition's urgent message filled the bridge. The Keltar system was under attack. A hostile empire called the Vryn Conglomerate had invaded with over 800 warships. They were bombing the planet. Thousands of civilians were dying. The Zelnari people who lived there couldn't hold out much longer. Jamie pulled up the data fast. The Vryn fleet was massive. They used special weapons that shut down most Coalition shields. The defenders didn't stand a chance. Then came the second part of the broadcast. All Coalition ships were ordered to retreat to rally points. The main fleet would gather its strength before attacking. That would take 12 days. Alex felt her jaw tighten. 12 days. Thousands more would die in 12 days. Jamie was already calculating. He looked up at Alex with those careful eyes of his. They could reach Keltar in 8 hours. Just 8 hours. Karen turned from her station. All weapons were ready. The new experimental systems were working perfectly. They could fight. Linda's voice came through the comm. Every system was running at peak efficiency. The Defiant had never been in better shape. Then Nathan spoke up from medical. His voice was quiet but clear. If they followed orders and retreated, thousands of civilians would die before help arrived. Children, families, people who had done nothing wrong. Alex stood up and walked to the front of the bridge. She looked at the display showing the Keltar system. 1 human ship against 800 enemy vessels. The Coalition said to retreat. Military doctrine said 1 ship couldn't win against such numbers. Her superiors back on Earth would be furious if she disobeyed. But Alex Monroe had joined the military for a reason. Not to follow orders blindly. Not to play politics. She joined to protect people who couldn't protect themselves. Sometimes that meant making hard choices. She turned to her crew. These men and women had served with her for 3 years. They knew what she was thinking. They could see it in her face. Jamie met her eyes. He nodded once. He had the calculations ready. Karen's hand was already moving over her controls. She was smiling just a little. That fierce smile she got when she knew they were about to do something crazy. Linda's voice came through again. She wasn't asking what they were doing. She was telling them the engines were ready for maximum speed whenever they wanted. Even Nathan didn't object. He understood what was at stake. Alex took a breath. This could end her career. It would probably end her life. 1 ship couldn't defeat 800. Everyone knew that. But everyone also knew that sometimes you had to try anyway. She gave the order. They would jump to Keltar system. Maximum speed. They would arrive in 8 hours and do whatever they could. The crew responded instantly. Not one person questioned the decision. Not one person hesitated. They all knew this was probably a one-way trip. But they also knew it was the right thing to do. Jamie set the course. Karen powered up all weapon systems. Linda pushed the engines to their limits. Nathan prepared the medical bay for whatever was coming. The Defiant turned away from its patrol route. It turned toward Keltar, toward 800 enemy ships, toward what looked like certain death. Alex sat back in her command chair. Her hands were steady. Her voice was calm. She had made her choice. Now they would see it through. In the Coalition Council chambers far away, alien leaders were still debating what to do. They talked about strategy and acceptable losses. They discussed the political implications. They calculated the risks. They decided to be cautious, to be smart, to wait for overwhelming force before engaging the enemy. It was the logical choice, the safe choice. The choice that meant thousands would die while they waited. The Defiant entered hyperspace. Space twisted around the ship as it jumped toward the battle. 8 hours to destination. 8 hours to figure out how one ship could make a difference. Alex watched her crew work. They were focused, professional, ready. These people trusted her. They would follow her into the impossible because they believed in what they were doing. She hoped she wouldn't let them down. She hoped their sacrifice would mean something. Most of all, she hoped they could save at least some of those civilians before it was too late. The Coalition had sent its best ships away. The Vryn thought they had already won. Nobody expected one human vessel to change anything. They were all about to learn something important. They were about to learn that humans didn't fight like everyone else. Humans didn't care about the odds. When humans saw people who needed help, they helped. Even if it was impossible, especially if it was impossible. The Defiant raced through hyperspace toward its destiny. One ship, 193 crew members. One chance to prove that courage mattered more than numbers. 8 hours until they arrived. 8 hours until everything changed. The Defiant dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Keltar system. Immediately, warning lights lit up across every station. Sensors showed exactly what the reports had said. 800 enemy ships. Maybe more. Alex stared at the display. She had seen bad situations before, but this was something else. The Vryn fleet surrounded the planet like a swarm of angry insects. Debris from destroyed defense stations floated everywhere. The planet's atmosphere glowed orange in spots where bombs were falling. Small ships were trying to escape the planet. Civilian transports packed with refugees. Most of them made it away. Some didn't. Alex watched an enemy patrol destroy an escape ship. Gone in a flash of light. Probably 200 people on that ship. 200 people who just wanted to live. She forced herself to stay calm. Getting angry wouldn't help anyone. Jamie was already working. His fingers moved fast over his controls. The Defiant was running silent, using its stealth systems. Human stealth technology was better than anything the Coalition had. Much better. To the Vryn sensors, the Defiant was invisible. Just another piece of space debris. They drifted closer, watching and learning. Jamie counted the enemy ships and sorted them into groups. There were hunter packs that patrolled the edges of the system, a siege group that surrounded the planet, doing the actual bombing, and a command cluster way out at the edge, directing everything. Karen studied the Vryn ships themselves. They weren't as tough as Coalition vessels. They relied on those quantum disruption weapons, the ones that shut down energy shields. Their armor was decent, but nothing special. And they had weak point defense systems. They expected to win through numbers, not individual strength. Nathan was listening to enemy communications. He had learned to read Vryn language patterns during the trip. What he found made Alex's blood run cold. The Vryn were planning a final attack on the planet's biggest city. They would hit it in 14 hours. Kill everyone there to break the resistance. Millions of people. Alex looked at the numbers again. 800 ships. 1 human ship. This wasn't about winning a fair fight. This was about changing the game completely. Make the Vryn think staying here cost too much. Make them want to leave. She called her senior officers to the conference room. They needed to talk about what the Defiant could actually do, what advantages they had that the Coalition didn't know about. Linda started. The Defiant's reactor was special. It combined 2 different power systems that shouldn't work together, but they did. The result was 10 times more power than a normal ship. That meant they could run full shields and all weapons at the same time. No other ship could do that. Karen went next. She talked about the railguns. While everyone else used energy weapons that the Vryn could disrupt, railguns fired solid metal at incredible speeds, chunks of metal moving at a fraction of light speed. Those disruption weapons were useless against them, and the kinetic energy could punch through almost any shield. Then she described the missiles. Human missiles were smart, really smart. They talked to each other during flight. They learned from enemy defenses and adapted. They worked together like a school of fish, finding weaknesses and exploiting them. Each missile was like a tiny tactical computer. Nathan added something important. He had been studying Vryn biology and culture from those intercepted messages. The Vryn had a rigid command structure. Everything came from the top. If you took out their leaders, the rest would panic. They weren't trained to think for themselves. Alex listened to all of it. Then she put together a plan. They wouldn't fight a big fleet battle. That would be suicide. Instead, they would hit precise targets at key moments, demonstrate overwhelming power when it mattered, make the Vryn leadership believe they were facing something they couldn't beat. It was psychological warfare as much as actual warfare. Change what the enemy believed was possible. Before they could move forward, sensors picked up a distress signal. A damaged Zelnari science ship was hiding in a nearby asteroid field. Life support was failing. About 40 people on board slowly dying. Alex made a quick decision. They would rescue those people. It would give them local intelligence, and it would prove to the survivors that someone came to help. The Defiant moved silently to the asteroid field. They found the Zelnari ship barely holding together. Hull breaches everywhere. Power almost gone. The Defiant extended its shields around the smaller vessel and sent repair teams across. 37 survivors came aboard. Their commander was a female named Valara. She was shocked to see a human ship. As far as she knew, humans didn't have any major military vessels in this region. She asked the obvious question. Why did they come? Alex's answer was simple and honest. Because it was the right thing to do. Valara stared at her for a moment. Then she provided crucial information. The Vryn flagship's location, the command structure, details about their leader, a high-ranking officer named Thraken. Everything Nathan had guessed was confirmed. The rescue took 20 minutes. 20 minutes too long, apparently. 3 Vryn patrol ships detected the operation and were closing fast. They would arrive in less than 5 minutes. Alex looked at her crew. This was it. Time to show what the Defiant could do. Time to prove that one human ship wasn't just one ship. It was something entirely different from what the galaxy expected. She told Valara to take her people to safety and watch. The Zelnari officer and her crew moved to an observation area. They had fought the Vryn for days. They knew how tough those patrol ships were. 3 of them would be a real fight. Karen was grinning now, that scary grin that meant she was ready. Her hands moved over the weapons controls like a concert pianist. She had every system ready to fire. Jamie calculated firing solutions. 3 targets, simultaneous engagement, maximum surprise. Linda confirmed all power systems were green. They could fire everything at once without any risk. The 3 Vryn ships came out of hyperspace together. They detected the Defiant immediately. One ship, one small ship by their standards. They probably thought this would be easy. They broadcast a demand for surrender in broken coalition language. Alex didn't bother responding. She just gave the order. Fire. What happened next took 14 seconds. That's all. 14 seconds. Railguns fired from multiple angles. The solid projectiles moved so fast they were invisible. They hit the Vryn shields and punched straight through like the shields weren't even there. Then through the armor. Then through the ships themselves. At the same time, missiles launched. Dozens of them. They moved in patterns that seemed random but weren't. Every time a Vryn ship tried to shoot one down, 3 others would slip through. The smart missiles learned and adapted faster than the enemy could react. Point defense lasers, meant for shooting down incoming fire, instead cleared space around the Defiant. Not one enemy shot got through. All 3 Vryn ships exploded. Just gone, debris expanding in silent clouds. 14 seconds from first shot to total victory. The Defiant had 0 damage. Not a scratch. Valara and her crew were speechless. They had never seen combat like that. One-sided didn't even begin to describe it. It was like watching a predator kill prey. Fast, efficient, overwhelming. Alex didn't celebrate. She just turned to Jamie and asked what came next. There was still work to do. 800 enemy ships minus 3. 797 to go. But somewhere in that Vryn fleet, someone had just watched 3 patrol ships disappear. Someone was looking at sensor data that didn't make sense. Someone was about to report to Thraken that they had a problem, a human problem. The news of the destroyed patrol ships reached the Vryn command cluster quickly. Thraken stood in his flagship's control center studying the reports. 3 ships gone, 1 unknown attacker. The sensor data was confusing. The signatures didn't match any coalition vessel they had faced before. His officers wanted to send a small force to investigate. Thraken refused. Small forces were clearly not enough. He ordered 30 ships to go. Enough to overwhelm anything, enough to make sure. On the Defiant, Jamie tracked the enemy response. 30 ships moving their way. He ran the numbers. They could fight 30 ships, but it would use a lot of their ammunition. Karen's missiles were good, but they weren't unlimited. Alex studied the tactical display. The Vryn were predictable. They thought numbers were everything. She could use that against them. They were near an asteroid field. Big rocks floating in space. Lots of cover. Lots of hiding places. Perfect for what she had in mind. She gave orders. They would move deep into the asteroid field. Linda adjusted the power systems to maximize stealth, while keeping them ready to fire at any moment. The Defiant slipped between the asteroids like a ghost. The 30 Vryn ships entered the asteroid field in a tight formation. They moved carefully but confidently. Their sensors swept back and forth searching. They expected to find one small ship hiding somewhere. Then they would destroy it with overwhelming force. Alex waited. Patience was important here. She needed them all committed, deep in the field where they couldn't escape quickly. Karen had her targeting solutions ready. Jamie marked the best attack angles. Linda had the stealth system ready to drop and re-engage in seconds. The moment came. The Vryn were right where Alex wanted them. Spread out but not too far apart. Confident but not alert enough, she gave the word. Strike. The Defiant dropped its stealth field and fired everything. Railguns roared. Missiles launched. 4 Vryn ships exploded before they even knew what hit them. Then the Defiant vanished again. Stealth back on. The ship moved using small thrusters, repositioning behind a large asteroid. The whole attack took maybe 5 seconds. The remaining Vryn ships opened fire at where the Defiant had been. They hit nothing but empty space and a few asteroids. Rocks exploded into smaller rocks. Their enemy was already gone. Before they could figure out what happened, the Defiant struck again. Different angle this time. 3 more ships destroyed. Gone again before anyone could react. Panic started to spread through the Vryn formation. Their commanders shouted orders. Some ships tried to retreat from the asteroid field. Others fired wildly at sensor shadows. A few stayed calm and tried to coordinate, but most were just scared. Alex kept striking. Appear, fire, disappear. The Defiant moved through the asteroids like it belonged there. Karen picked targets with cold precision. Jamie calculated each move 3 steps ahead. Linda kept the systems running perfectly despite the strain. 20 minutes. That's how long the one-sided battle lasted. When it was over, 18 of the 30 Vryn ships were destroyed. The other 12 fled in disorder, some damaged, all terrified. They broadcast panicked reports back to their fleet. An enemy that appeared and disappeared. That struck from nowhere. That couldn't be killed. On the bridge, Karen checked her ammunition levels. They had used less than she expected. The hit-and-run tactics were efficient. They could keep this up for a while. But Alex knew they had achieved something more important than a tactical victory. They had planted fear. The Vryn thought they understood how this war worked. Big fleets fight big fleets. Numbers win. Simple. The Defiant had just shown them they were wrong. Nathan proposed something interesting. They should broadcast a message to the entire Vryn fleet. Not a threat, just facts. Cold, clear facts, Jamie objected at first. Giving away their position would eliminate surprise. But Alex saw what Nathan was getting at. Surprise wasn't the goal. Fear was. Make them afraid to stay. Make them want to leave. They composed the message carefully. 1 human ship had destroyed 21 Vryn vessels. No damage taken. The message included sensor logs to prove it. Battle recordings showing the one-sided combat. Then a simple question. How many more losses are acceptable? The final line was a promise. The next attack would target the command cluster. They were coming for the leadership. The message went out on all Vryn frequencies. Every ship in the fleet received it. including Thraken's flagship. On that flagship, Thraken read the message 3 times. He watched the battle recordings. His intelligence officers confirmed everything. The logs were real. 21 ships destroyed by 1 enemy vessel. He still had overwhelming numerical superiority. 779 ships against 1. But those numbers didn't feel as comforting as they should. This enemy fought differently than anyone the Vryn had faced before. His subordinates wanted to know what to do. Thraken made a decision. He would not retreat. He would not show weakness. He ordered 200 ships to form a search and destroy formation. They would blanket the entire system with sensors. They would find this human ship and crush it through sheer numbers. It was exactly the decision Alex expected him to make. Pride. That was his weakness. He couldn't accept that 1 ship was beating him, so he would commit more and more resources to killing that 1 ship, which meant those ships weren't bombing the planet, weren't hunting refugees, weren't preparing for the final assault on that city. They were chasing the Defiant. Every hour they spent hunting humans was another hour those millions of civilians stayed alive. That was a victory all by itself. Jamie plotted the movement of those 200 ships. They were spreading out in a careful pattern. Overlapping sensor coverage. Very thorough. In about 8 hours, there would be nowhere to hide. Alex looked at the tactical display. 200 ships hunting them. The command cluster still sitting out there directing everything, and that city on the planet, where millions of people were living on borrowed time. She had promised to hit the command cluster next. Time to keep that promise, but not in a way Thraken would expect. Never in the way they expected. Karen was looking at her captain with that expression. The one that said she knew something crazy was coming. The one that said she was ready for it. Jamie was already thinking ahead. His mind was working on the problem. How do you attack a heavily defended command cluster when 200 enemy ships are hunting you? Nathan was quiet. He had said his piece about the message. Now he would trust his captain to do what needed doing. Linda's voice came through the comm. She could tell something big was coming. Whatever it was, the Defiant was ready. Valara and her surviving crew were still on board. They watched the humans work. These people were different from any coalition species they had met. They didn't calculate odds the same way. They didn't think about war the same way. When everyone said something was impossible, humans heard it as a challenge. Alex stood up from her command chair. She walked to the main display and stared at the planet. Then at the command cluster far across the system. Then back at the planet. An idea was forming. A completely insane idea. The kind of idea that would either work brilliantly or get them all killed. She turned back to her crew. They were watching her, waiting, trusting. She smiled. Just a little. Then she started giving orders. The plan was simple in concept, but terrifying in execution. The Defiant would use the planet itself as a slingshot. Dive close to Keltar Prime, swing around using the planet's gravity, and build enough speed to cross the entire system in minutes. Fast enough that the Vryn wouldn't have time to organize a proper defense. Nathan had suggested it first. Use physics as a weapon. Jamie did the math and confirmed it could work. Linda calculated the stress on the ship's structure. It would push the Defiant to its limits, but the ship could handle it. Probably Karen loved the idea. A high-speed attack run on the enemy command cluster. Get in fast, hit hard, get out faster. It was crazy. It was dangerous. It was perfect. Alex gave the order. The Defiant dropped stealth and accelerated toward the planet at maximum thrust. Every Vryn sensor in the system lit up. The human ship was moving. Fast. Heading right toward their siege line. Vryn ships scrambled to intercept. But the Defiant was already moving faster than they expected. By the time they changed course, the human ship was past them. Orbital defense platforms opened fire. The Vryn had captured them and turned them against the planet. Now they targeted the Defiant. Energy weapons streaked through space. Karen handled the point defense. Lasers shot down incoming fire with mechanical precision. A few shots got through, but the shields absorbed them easily. The Defiant kept accelerating. They hit the upper atmosphere. The ship shuddered as air resistance grabbed at it. Heat shields started to glow. Linda watched the temperature readings climb. They were within safe limits. Barely. The planet's surface was visible through the view screens. Cities burning. Refugee camps. The scars of war. Alex forced herself to focus on the mission. Save these people by destroying their enemy. That was the job. They swung around the dark side of the planet. The gravity well pulled at them, adding velocity. The ship groaned under the strain. Metal stressed. Systems complained. But everything held together. Linda made tiny adjustments to their course. Too steep and they would crash into the planet. Too shallow and they wouldn't gain enough speed. She threaded the needle perfectly, trusting her instincts and experience. They emerged from behind the planet like a bullet from a gun, velocity far beyond normal combat speeds. The command cluster was directly ahead, and they were approaching faster than the Vryn believed any ship could move. Thraken saw it happening. His flagship's sensors tracked the impossible approach. He ordered evasive maneuvers, but capital ships were slow. They couldn't dodge something moving that fast. The escort ships tried to intercept, but they were positioned wrong. Defending against an attack from the system interior, not from the planet. The Defiant screamed past most of them before they could fire a shot. Karen opened fire at maximum range. Railguns hammered Thraken's flagship. The solid projectiles punched through the heavy armor like it was tissue paper. Secondary explosions rippled across the massive ship's hull. Ammunition stores detonated. Power conduits ruptured. The second command ship tried to shield the flagship with its own mass. Smart thinking, but the human missiles adapted instantly. They changed targets mid-flight, swarming the new threat. Coordinated strikes on shield generators. Cascading failures. Some escort ships finally got into position to fire. Energy weapons and missiles reached for the Defiant. Karen's point defense systems worked overtime. Most incoming fire was destroyed. A few hits got through. The shields flared bright but held. Jamie had calculated exactly where Thraken would be. The flagship's command deck near the top of the vessel. Karen targeted that specific location. The railguns fired one final salvo before the Defiant shot past the command cluster at incredible speed. The projectiles hit perfectly. The command deck shattered. Everyone inside died instantly: Thraken, his senior officers, the core leadership of the entire invasion fleet. Gone in a flash, the flagship broke apart. Internal explosions tore it into pieces. The second command ship was crippled, venting atmosphere, drifting powerless. Only the third capital ship remained operational, and its commander had never expected to be in charge. The Defiant continued across the system, still moving too fast to slow down quickly. Dozens of Vryn ships pursued, but they couldn't catch up. And more importantly, they were waiting for orders that weren't coming. On the third capital ship, the new commander stared at his displays. The flagship destroyed, senior leadership dead, the invasion stalled. And that one human ship had proven it could strike anywhere at will. He knew the Coalition's main fleet was approaching, maybe days away. If they stayed, they would be trapped between two enemies. The human ship behind them, the Coalition fleet in front. 700 ships sounded like a lot until you faced an enemy you couldn't pin down. The cost-benefit calculation changed. This invasion had already cost over 60 ships. The primary objectives hadn't been achieved. The enemy had proven more capable than intelligence suggested. Staying meant risking the entire fleet. The new commander made the hardest decision of his life. He broadcast orders to the entire fleet. Withdraw, immediate withdrawal, all ships to hyperspace, regroup beyond Coalition space. The Vryn fleet began jumping away. First a few ships, then dozens, then hundreds. The siege line around Keltar Prime broke apart. The hunter packs abandoned their search. Within an hour, the system was clear. The Defiant finally managed to decelerate at the far edge of the system. Linda burned through the last of their fuel reserves, killing velocity. They coasted to a stop, monitoring sensors to confirm the enemy was really leaving. The damage reports came in. 3 hull breaches sealed by emergency systems. Port rail gun array offline. Shield generators at 60%. 1 missile tube jammed. 7 crew members injured, none critically. Linda surveyed the damage and gave her assessment. They could repair everything given time. A few days of work. Maybe a week. The Defiant would fly again. Nathan treated the wounded in medical. Burns, broken bones, concussions from the high-speed maneuvers. Nothing that wouldn't heal. He was exhausted but satisfied. The casualties they prevented numbered in the tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands. Karen ran diagnostics on her weapon systems. The railguns had performed perfectly, the missiles even better. She was already thinking about improvements for next time, because there would be a next time. There always was. Jamie compiled the final statistics. 800 Vryn ships had entered the system. 734 were leaving. The rest were debris. One human ship had changed the entire balance of power. Alex sat in her command chair, watching the last enemy ships jump to hyperspace. They had done it. Somehow, against all odds, they had actually done it. One ship, 193 crew members. They had saved a world. Valara approached her on the bridge. The Zelnari commander had tears in her eyes. Her people were saved. Her world was saved. Because one human captain refused to follow orders that meant abandoning civilians to die. She asked Alex why. Why risk everything for a species that had dismissed humans as weak? Why disobey the Coalition's orders? Why throw away a promising career? Alex gave the same answer she always gave. Because it was the right thing to do. Nothing more complicated than that. When people need help, you help them. Even if it's hard, especially if it's hard, the crew began repairs. They would stay here until they were sure the Vryn were really gone. Until the Coalition fleet arrived. Until the job was completely finished. Down on Keltar Prime, the bombing had stopped. People emerged from shelters. They looked up at the sky and saw the enemy fleet jumping away. They didn't know why. They didn't know about the one human ship that changed everything, but they would learn. Soon everyone in the galaxy would learn. The story would spread. One human ship appeared. That was all it took. 3 days later, the Coalition fleet arrived. Over 300 warships dropped out of hyperspace, ready for a massive battle. Instead, they found the Keltar system secure and quiet. One damaged human vessel was conducting repairs near the outer planets. The Coalition commander was a Zelnari admiral named Korthan. He was old, dignified, and very confused. His intelligence officers showed him the sensor logs. Debris from dozens of destroyed enemy ships. All the weapon signatures matched the human vessel. All of them. Korthan requested permission to come aboard the Defiant. Alex granted it immediately. She knew what was coming. Politics, explanations, probably consequences for disobeying orders. The Admiral arrived with his senior staff. The meeting took place in the Defiant's conference room. Alex presented a factual account of everything they had done. Sensor logs, tactical recordings, casualty reports. The evidence was clear and irrefutable. Valara attended the meeting too. She confirmed everything Alex said. She described watching the Defiant destroy ships with ease. She emphasized that Monroe came when the Coalition ordered everyone to retreat. Korthan listened carefully. Then he asked the important question. Why did Alex disobey orders? Her answer was simple and direct. Coalition military doctrine prioritizes protecting assets over protecting civilians. Human doctrine is different. Save lives first. Worry about ships and politics later. She calculated they could save thousands of people and accepted the risks involved. The Admiral was quiet for a long moment. His species had been part of the Coalition for millennia. They had forgotten something important. Military forces exist to protect people, not the other way around. This human reminded him of that basic truth. Back at Coalition headquarters, the Council debated for days. Some members were grateful. The Zelnari especially. Others were embarrassed. How could the lowest tier member accomplish what their combined might could not? Some were even angry, though they wouldn't admit why. The Thracian representative demanded Monroe face consequences for disobeying orders. The Zelnari delegate argued she saved thousands of their people when the Coalition abandoned them. The arguments got heated. Accusations flew. The political situation was complicated. Earth's ambassador was a man named Charles Grant. He was a skilled diplomat who saw the opportunity here. He proposed a compromise. The Coalition would formally recognize humanity's contribution. Better trade status, military cooperation, access to technology. In return, Monroe would accept an official reprimand for disobeying orders. Everyone could save face. The reprimand would satisfy those who cared about discipline. The rewards would satisfy those who wanted to honor the achievement. And the truth would remain. One human ship changed everything. The compromise was accepted. Behind closed doors, human status in the Coalition rose dramatically. The dismissive attitude toward humanity ended overnight. You don't dismiss people who just saved an entire world. Admiral Korthan visited the Defiant one final time. He brought the survivors from Keltar Prime. 47,000 civilians who owed their lives to the human ship's intervention. They gathered in the cargo bay and throughout the ship, watching on screens. Korthan presented Alex with the Star of Valor, the Coalition's highest military honor, never before given to a human, never before given for such an impossible victory. Valara spoke on behalf of the survivors. She talked about how they were told help was coming. "Hold on," they said. "The Coalition will save you." But the Coalition chose caution instead. Only the humans chose courage. Alex accepted the honor but deflected the credit. She reminded everyone that the Defiant's crew was 193 people. All of them chose to risk their lives. All of them made this victory possible. The credit belonged to every person on this ship. The story spread throughout Coalition space. Different species told it differently, but the core remained true. One human ship, 800 enemy vessels. An impossible victory. The tale grew with each telling, but nobody needed to exaggerate. The truth was impressive enough. Military academies studied the battle. They analyzed the tactics, the use of terrain, the psychological warfare, the precision strikes. Coalition officers began to realize that humans approached warfare differently. Individual initiative, creative thinking, adaptability over rigid doctrine. Trade delegations arrived at Earth. Technology sharing agreements were signed. Human innovations in power generation, weapons technology, and stealth systems became valuable. Other species wanted to learn from humanity instead of dismissing them. The Vryn conglomerate didn't attempt another invasion. Their defeat at Keltar became a warning. The Coalition now included a species that fought with unexpected ferocity. Future conflicts would require different strategies. Different calculations. The Defiant returned to Earth for repairs. The damage was extensive. Linda already had plans for improvements. They had been lucky in several critical moments. She wanted to eliminate those vulnerabilities before the next mission. Karen was offered promotion and her own ship. She refused. She wanted to stay with the Defiant and continue developing new weapons. The battle taught her that innovation was as important as execution. She had more ideas to try. Jamie wrote a detailed analysis of the engagement. His work became required reading in military schools across multiple species. His insights into asymmetric warfare and psychological operations reshaped how people thought about combat. Nathan returned to his research with a new perspective. He had seen that sometimes force was necessary to protect innocent lives. His medical protocols for treating alien species were adopted throughout the Coalition. His work would save thousands in future conflicts. Linda got her improved systems approved. The Defiant would be even more capable after the refit. She made sure her engineering crew received recognition for their work. They had kept the ship running through impossible situations. Alex was promoted to Admiral. Fleet Command, she accepted on one condition. Her first assignment would be training the next generation of captains. She wanted to teach them to think independently, to act with courage, to remember why they wore the uniform. 5 years later, Keltar system thrived. The population recovered. They built a monument in the capital city. It showed a single ship facing impossible odds, a reminder that courage could change everything. Children grew up hearing the story. The Coalition changed its military doctrine. Fleet actions remained important, but they recognized that properly equipped individual ships could accomplish strategic objectives. The rigid hierarchy became more flexible. Independent thinking was valued instead of discouraged. Humanity continued designing innovative vessels. Each one pushed boundaries. Other species adopted human technologies and training methods. The exchange of knowledge benefited everyone. The Coalition became stronger through cooperation instead of hierarchy. A phrase spread across Coalition space. A new understanding. When humans arrive, everything changes. Not through overwhelming force. Not through superior numbers. Through creativity. Through determination. Through the willingness to do what's right regardless of the odds. The UNS Defiant remained in active service. New missions. New challenges. The crew changed over time, but the spirit remained. That same spirit that said impossible just meant nobody had done it yet. Alex Monroe eventually retired after 30 more years of service. She trained hundreds of officers. Many of them became captains who led with courage and compassion. Her legacy lived on through them. On the anniversary of the battle, representatives from 17 species gathered at Keltar Prime. They stood before the monument and remembered. One ship, one crew. One decision that changed history. The Coalition was stronger because of what happened here. They learned that courage mattered. that individual actions could have strategic consequences, that doing the right thing was more important than following safe rules. Young officers from many species came to see the monument. They read the inscription. They learned the story. They understood the lesson. Sometimes one ship, crewed by people who refuse to accept defeat, is worth more than 1,000 ships that only know how to follow orders. The galaxy was a better place because one captain made a hard choice, because one crew trusted their leader, because humans showed that the newest members of the coalition had something valuable to teach, the oldest members. Only one human ship appeared that day at Keltar. System, outnumbered, outgunned, facing impossible odds, that was all it took.